I am Keira Sorrells. I'm the founder and president of the Preemie Parent Alliance, which is a network of organizations around the country that each provides support to families that have had a baby in the NICU. I am also one of those parents who has had triplets in the NICU. My daughters were born at 25 weeks, 5 days. And unfortunately, our original host, Nick Hall, got caught in the blizzard out in Colorado, so he's unable to be here with us. But for those who don't know Nick, he is the co-founder and president of Graham's Foundation, and he is also a founding member of the Preemie Parent Alliance. He is a true champion for premature babies and their families, so I am going to do my very best to fill his shoes tonight. So our webinar tonight will highlight the pressing need for new neonatal medications and the promising policy developments that may offer a way to solve the challenge of encouraging the development of drugs for our nation's newborns. We will also discuss specific actions that you can take to show your support if you deem that appropriate. Our panel tonight includes a host of experts and advocates. We're going to start with Dr. Jonathan Davis, Vice Chair of Pediatrics and Chief of Newborn Medicine at Tufts Medical Center. Dr. Davis is also Chair of the Neonatal Advisory Committee at the Food and Drug Administration. Hello, Dr. Davis. Thank you for being with us.
It's a great...
Next, we...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You introduce everyone. Go ahead.
Did we lose Keira?
Keira, are you there?
Yes.
Dr. Davis, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm still here.
Why don't we go into your... Oh, Keira's back. Okay.
Yeah, I just have... Let me just run through quickly to introduce the rest of our panel and just a couple of housekeeping notes, and then we'll jump right in with Dr. Davis. We've also got Jennifer Daigle, also a member of the Preemie Parent Alliance, and many of you may know Jen as a writer for Huffington Post Parents and author of the acclaimed book From Hope to Joy. It's a story that chronicles her experience in the NICU after giving birth to her micro-preemie daughter, Joy. We will be recording the webinar, so if you have to jump off for any reason, you will be able to revisit it later, and we will make a link to the recording available within 24 hours after we conclude. All of our attendees are muted, and we will open the webinar for questions at the end of the presentation. You should all see a Q&A text box in the bottom right panel of the webinar page, so please use that as we go along throughout the evening. And you can do that, or you could also email our moderator, Andy Rosenberg, at rosenberg@thornrun.com. That's AROSENBERG at thornrun.com. So with that, let's jump right in and start with you, Dr. Davis.
Thanks very much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you folks. A little bit unconventional time for a webinar, but I can adapt, like a night on call, so that's no problem. I really want to say up front how important it's been having voices of parents engaged in our efforts, both at the Food and Drug Administration and the International Neonatal Consortium, to make things work. I think the parents are a major driving force and are going to only play more important roles as we move forward. But I'm going to talk to you about some of the reasons why we're very bullish on things with respect to the NICU. Our time has come, finally. I'm delighted, and we certainly can use your help to continue this momentum that we have moving forward. I'll take the next slide. So as you folks know, as we do work at the FDA and NIH, 6% of the 4 million births each year in the U.S. require admission to newborn intensive care unit. And our prematurity rates in the United States are the worst of any developed country in the world. They're somewhere around 11%. The total cost of prematurity in this country is greater than $29 billion each year. And when you look at our outcome and survival data for our smallest and most vulnerable patients, there's really only been small improvements in survival and outcome in the last 20 years. So whereas many other fields of medicine have made really tremendous advances, we're just plodding along and not making nearly as much impact as I would like to see in others. And part of the issue is that greater than 90% of the drugs that we use in the NICU are not FDA approved for their use, which means that there have never been adequate safety and effectiveness trials conducted to show that they work. So for those of you that have had babies in the NICU, that's probably an eye-opening comment to suggest that some of the smallest babies can receive up to 60 drugs at a time, and many of these babies are receiving adult formulations that may not be safe for them, but that's the best we can do. And the last approved drug by the FDA that significantly improved survival and outcome was surfactant in 1991. And that was one of my first papers, was in the New England Journal as a faculty member as we invented forms of surfactant at the University of Rochester. So 25 years, we have not had a major drug for preterm infants approved by the FDA that has been known to improve survival and outcome. Next. So there's been lots of laws passed to try to help us. So this is the history of pediatric initiatives, and it goes all the way back to 1970, where 78% of drugs had no information on children, yet they were being used in children on a routine basis. And what you can see is throughout the next 40 years, there were a variety of different initiatives and laws passed in the United States to try to improve drug study and drug approvals in newborns and infants and children, and yet even when we hit about 2008 or 2009, it was still less than 50% of the drugs, if you look in the physician desk reference, actually had significant data available on children. Next. Next slide, great. So how about neonates? So that's the biggest problem. When we look at it, all the different laws, the Pediatric Research Equity Act and the Best Pharmaceutical for Children Act, all of those acts were designed to accelerate drug development for children. And when we looked at the impact of those drugs, we found that 406 medicines, which is great, were studied in the pediatric population, and the laws gave them an extra 6 months of patent protection. So there was a real financial incentive to do that. And yet, out of those 406 medicines, only 28 of them had actually been studied in neonates. And what was worse, of the 28 drugs, we didn't use any of them. We only used an occasional one. So the drugs that they tested were drugs that we almost never used in newborns. So that is a real problem for us. Next slide, please. So developing drugs for infants and children has really involved national and global efforts. So the studies that we're conducting now through the International Neonatal Consortium that the Preemie Parent Alliance and Nick Hall's groups are intimately involved in, it really requires attention to many details. And these studies, we've really developed it into a team science approach, having pediatricians and nurses, families, members of industry, regulators, everybody's got a seat at the table. This is unprecedented in my career, and it's really fueled by better communication and collaboration among the Food and Drug Administration, NIH, FDA, industry, and the academic community. And these global networks and public-private partnerships that we've set up are the most promising. This is very, very exciting for all of us. and I have never seen anything like it in my career, and I am absolutely honored to have been chosen to play a major role in the development of this network and consortium moving forward. Next slide. So the International Neonatal Consortium, we're concentrating our efforts on those conditions most commonly encountered in the NICU. You can see on the right we have picked the 6 top conditions. Obviously, prevention of preterm labor and preterm delivery is our goal. I don't know if that's around the corner, but regardless, I think we've picked the highest priority conditions that we want to work on in order to dramatically improve survival and outcome in our smallest and most vulnerable patients. Next slide, please. So we have tremendous numbers of partners and stakeholders in this effort, and I'm not going to go through them all in the interest of time, but everyone seems to be engaged and really excited about these efforts. And I think we've finally gotten to a point where we can go to Congress and say, we need help. We recently passed a major bill on neonatal abstinence syndrome. I think Congress is looking for easy wins, and if you don't like babies, as I said in some of my briefings in the House and the Senate, if you can't help babies, that's why you're here. And if you can't do it, you might as well go home and give up. So this is a list of everybody who has signed on to this effort, and we're making tremendous progress, and we need your help. Next. So the Promoting Life-Saving New Therapies for Neonates Act. It's a very long title, but it really is an essential piece of legislation. It's really designed to stimulate the development of safe and effective drugs specifically for neonates. It's addressing the most critical needs. It's designed to spur innovation and really incentivize companies. And it's not just the big guys like Novartis and Bristol and Pfizer. It's really the small biotech companies who are trying to decide, should we invest our efforts and expertise in developing drugs? If we want to make money for our company, where do you go? You go to adults with cardiovascular disease, blood pressure problems, cancer. But if you really want to incentivize them, we're going to have to do that in order to move them into the neonatal drug development space. So we really want to help us improve survival and outcome, and we need your help. So supporting Senate Bill 2041, you can write your senators and get engaged, telling them your stories of having preterm babies in the NICU is really powerful. It's really helpful. And don't underestimate the power of what you have to say. And many parents say, oh, come on, I'm not going to be able to influence legislation and influence Congress. I actually felt the same way myself. And yet our neonatal abstinence bill passed the House unanimously, passed the Senate unanimously, and I just received a copy of the bill from the President with his signature on it framed, thanking me for my efforts in making bill a reality. So there are opportunities for all of us. Next slide, please. So I think I'll stop there. I tried to move through things quickly. Basically, the way this bill works is it would give companies that develop a technology just for babies and a new drug, and it has to be a drug designed just for neonates, and it has to make a significant impact. So it's not going to be a drug that's going to help a rash get better. This is a drug that's going to prevent blindness or prevent cerebral palsy or prevent asthma, big-ticket items that really influence neonatal outcome. And if you develop a drug that makes a significant impact, the International Neonatal Consortium, the FDA, will set that bar high, and you will get a voucher that you can use on your own drugs or sell to someone else to get an extra year of patent protection. So that's the key, is to incentivize these companies to develop drugs. We don't want to wait until it's an adult drug that they're developing for kids. We want it to be a drug designed for neonates, like surfactant, like nitric oxide, to really make a major impact on those babies. So I think I'll stop there, and I don't know how you want to proceed, but I'll be here for questions if you have any other questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. Thank you so much for embracing the importance of the parent participant as well, and just how important parents are to this entire landscape. We're going to move on next to Ally from the National Association of Neonatal Nurses. Ally, thanks for being with us.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm very, very honored to be here as well and to be a part of this wonderful initiative for the babies that I'm honored and privileged to take care of in the neonatal unit every day. I'm a neonatal nurse practitioner, and I've been a neonatal nurse for over 16 years, and I have the honor and privilege, like I said, to care for these babies and to work very closely with parents in caring for them and hoping that they have a wonderful outcome, and I get to send them home and see them back at the preemie parties that we have at the hospital. I got involved in advocacy because as a nurse and nurse practitioner, I know that the only way that I can see change coming in this area of medicine is by advocating for the patients who cannot advocate for themselves, and aligning with the parents and the physicians like Dr. Davis is a wonderful opportunity for me as a nurse to represent the thousands of neonatal nurses around the country who care for these babies. And like I put in my slide, babies cannot advocate for themselves, and we as clinicians have that unique position to understand the problems that they face every day in a NICU and to understand the implications of not having the appropriate medications that we need to care for them, to give them the best outcome possible for a very bright future. So me being involved in this is, again, quite an honor, and I've been shouting it from the rooftops since this came about several months back at the National Association of Neonatal Nurses Conference. And we've all banded together and had a virtual lobby week a few weeks ago that lasted for 5 days that promoted Senate Bill 20401, advocating for our patients. And I know we had numerous involvement by the nurses and nurse practitioners within the country to promote this for our babies. And I had the opportunity with Dr. Davis and Jennifer as well to appear in Washington, D.C. About a month or so ago to speak at a congressional hearing regarding this bill. And I was so impressed to see the interest by the staff members. So your voice does matter, and I say that to the parents that may be listening because we are advocating for you, and we need you to advocate with us. We need you guys to be another voice, a strong voice with your stories and your experiences in the NICU as a parent. And I know firsthand that there's not a lot of drugs available out there at all for our population. And like Dr. Davis said, you know, we haven't really had anything since surfactant in 1991, and then the development of nitric oxide in the late 1990s as well. And everything we use is pretty much geared for adult medicine, and we utilize it for our neonatal population with the hopes of it working to its full effect to help our babies to grow and thrive in the neonatal unit. So with that, I ask, you know, everyone to please get involved and to spread the word as quickly as possible and write your senators and your legislators and let them know, and definitely tell your stories. They impact us at the bedside, and they will completely impact those who have the power to make change in these laws. So again, thank you for letting me be part of this wonderful group, and I'll be available as well for any questions.
Great. Pardon me. Thank you so much, Ally. And I do want to just make a quick comment that the National Association of Neonatal Nurses has also just been such a wonderful champion for families and has really embraced parents in so many ways as a key component to this. So I thank you for echoing that because it really does permeate throughout your entire organization. So I'm going to touch on just a few things that Allyson talked about and Dr. Davis. If you want to go on to my next slide, please. As I mentioned, I am the mother of triplets that were born at 25 weeks, 5 days, and I now run the Preemie Parent Alliance and also had my own support organization that helps families locally here in Jackson, Mississippi. So those of you who might be new to advocacy, and Dr. Davis also mentioned, one of those things, well, I'm just one person, can I really make a difference? If you are a part of a nonprofit organization, you may wonder, well, I thought that the IRS restricted advocacy of nonprofits. And if you'll just move on to the next slide, that would be fantastic. So what does the IRS say about 501c3? It says that a 501c3 organization may not attempt to influence legislation as a substantial part of its activities, and it may not participate in any campaign activity for or against political candidates. A majority of policy work done on behalf of your nonprofit cannot be lobbying. So what this means is that if you are a staff member or volunteer for your nonprofit, you cannot campaign for or against a political candidate on behalf of your organization. For example, I could not say as PPA's president, vote for A, B, or C, or vote for C. As an organization, PPA also cannot put out materials asking members or others to vote for or against a candidate. Similarly, your staff or your volunteers cannot lobby for particular legislation on behalf of your organization. So again, I could not say, as PPA's president, please vote for X or vote for a particular policy alternative. What you can do is to look at advocacy from the standpoint of educating. And that's what Ally touched on, what Dr. Davis touched on. Karen Bogenschneider is the co-author of the book Evidence-Based Policymaking, and she has referred to advocacy as advocacy with a big A and advocacy with a little a. So advocacy with a little a would be considered as working on behalf of preemies or NICU families, educating legislators or other policymakers about how policies affect families so that families are considered when policies are made. You want to make sure that you might be just one person, but you really can make a difference. When you are educating a legislator, you want to make sure that you are talking about the impact on families. As Ally and Dr. Davis both said, personal stories matter, but you also need to make sure that you're being specific. How exactly has your family been impacted, perhaps negatively, by the lack of new drug development and neonatal health care? How might your family and future families be positively impacted by new drug development? What might happen if we do nothing? You want to make sure also that if you're contacting your legislator, that you're also familiarizing yourself with your legislator. Get to know that legislator, know what their voting records are, what are their topics of importance, what kind of bills has he or she introduced, what committees are he or she assigned to. You want to make sure that you remain positive and nonpartisan. I read a study that was done several years back, but it was about the way legislators view child and family advocates. And unfortunately, the view was not all that positive. They tend to see child and family advocates as unorganized, lacking focus, just making a lot of noise. So we want to make sure that when you are reaching out to your legislators, that you remain positive, you remain nonpartisan. You want to make sure that you are building that relationship as a reliable source that is trustworthy and able to work, on both sides of the aisle. And it is important to contact your legislators. They're not going to know that this topic or any topic is important to their constituents unless you let them know. And you've got to put in that time to developing that relationship, even beyond the letter. If they have town hall meetings, if you can get a face-to-face meeting, anything you can do to continue to build that relationship and build that trust is, you know, it's really important in any relationship. And again, share your story, share the personal impact. Don't just complain about what hasn't been done for so long, but just be focused on being gracious and being professional. Make sure that the information you provide is factual, and make sure that it is presented in a way that is usable so that they can understand and they can easily share the information that you have. So, you know, why should preemie families get involved in public policy? Public policy is critical to the health of premature and critically ill babies because, as we all know, and as Allie pointed out as well, they cannot speak for themselves. They have different healthcare needs than adults. You know, they represent a small fraction of the healthcare marketplace, and they are the poorest segment of the population. As a consequence, they don't have the economic clout to command attention sufficiently to ensure that all their needs met. And we all know, especially the parents here that are listening tonight, we all know too well that we are their voice for them. We are the only voice that they have. So moving on to the next slide so that we can get to Jen Daigle. She is our final panelist, and she has done exactly this. She recently presented at a congressional briefing, and so she's going to share with us a little bit about that experience. Jen.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. To start, my name is Jennifer Daigle, and I am a mother of 4 children, and my youngest was born 17 weeks early. So as Keira mentioned, I am a member of the PPA, but I'm not part of a particular nonprofit, so I'm really solely speaking from the NICU parent perspective and a mother of a preemie. So just a quick background, my daughter, her name is Joy, she was born 23 weeks gestation in 2012. And she was 1 pound and 4 ounces and 11 3/4 inches long. And she spent 121 days in the NICU. And as most NICU parents will tell you, and parents of preemies, it's really difficult, and that's an understatement. During her 4 months there, she was, endured more invasive medical procedures and was given more medications than most people will, endure in their lifetime. And sadly, that's the case for most premature babies, and especially micro-preemies like my daughter. So, too many premature babies will grow to live with several medical disabilities as they age, caused by their premature birth. And they have to live with those for the rest of their lives. So, although a lot of, all neonatologists and NICU nurses and therapists are doing everything they can, and we recognize that, to help these babies survive and thrive with what's available to them, and there are several companies developing new products to have these babies live the best life they can, we can still do more. And, wouldn't it be great if new medications were developed exclusively for neonatal use? Medications that were tested and found to have very little negative side effects on the very immature body systems of premature babies. They're not just small babies, they are immature systems. Their systems aren't functioning properly, and they really do respond differently to medication. So wouldn't it be great if we were able to reduce the number of cases of these severe disabilities, like bronchial pulmonary dysplasia, necrotizing enterocolitis, cerebral palsy, blindness, all those things that Dr. Davis mentioned earlier. And I think so, and I think everybody here would agree. And that's why I support the bill. And as Keira and Allie mentioned, that's why I went to Capitol Hill last month and spoke at the congressional briefing in support of the bill. And I shared my personal story, like Keira was just saying. And I'd like to think, it had some effect. While being there and meeting Dr. Davis and Allie Kayton and several staffers, it was obvious, and people spoke to us afterwards, that these staffers were at least interested in the bill and had expressed that they would go back to their senators to, recommend the bill to them. So I just want to say, in closing, that innovation can't happen without research. And like Dr. Davis said, that's where we are now. This is where it begins, with several individuals who share the same goal. And everybody here tonight can agree that our goal is to do more to help our newest and most vulnerable babies. We know a lot is being done, but all of us want more, and we want to see the future premature babies, have better outcomes and lives than our children have today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. And one of the things that Nick shared with me as we were working through the planning sessions for this webinar was about his extensive experience in corporate America. I was having some technical issues on my part, so tell me, have you heard me say this already?
Oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
No, okay. Sorry. I had a little technical issue on my end here. So Nick noted that what helps him work more effectively with his partners is that he has to understand the priorities of their sales organizations. He has to ask what their priorities are, what their incentives are, and we know that an incentive alone might not get a person to take a specific action, but it certainly can help. And I think that's the case with this bill as well. As we've mentioned, by using your voice to say that you support this bill, you are saying that promoting new therapies for neonates is important to you. And that is an action that you can take. Hopefully, it is the first step of many along the journey of fighting for better outcomes for our babies. So with that, we're going to open up for questions. Again, you can use the question box down at the bottom if you've got other questions, if you have questions. I do have a couple that have come across. I think the first one, and I will ask you, Dr. Davis, to address this. So what are some of the big challenges in trying to develop a new drug besides the incentive piece for the drug companies? For example, are trials a challenge given the scenario of a sick baby that can't speak for themselves?
There are enormous challenges that really make it difficult. First, I don't have to tell everybody here, this is a small market. There's not like you develop a drug for an adult for blood pressure, you're selling it to hundreds of millions of patients. That's not the case, unfortunately, for us. So it's a small population. It's high risk. There's a lot of liability. Something goes wrong, no one wants to say they've hurt a baby with a drug that might have side effects. So that's the second problem. The third problem is, for animal models, there aren't necessarily good animal models for us to test the effects of the drug. And it's complicated. You're right. When we do these studies in kids, many of you as parents are asking us as physicians of, okay, well, what does this mean when she's 21 years old and growing up and going to college? How's she going to do? And, if I was that smart and had that much of a crystal ball, I'd be working on Wall Street and not in the NICU. So it is a real challenge. It's a challenge, for instance, coming to you as parents. Mm-hmm. And, you've just had a small preterm infant. One of the things we could use your help is, how do we develop these crazy consent forms? I mean, we've got them that are 20 pages long, and we're asking you to allow your newborn infant, think of your baby when they were most critically ill, and me, who you've never met before, coming to you and asking you to allow me to put your baby in a clinical trial. That's very difficult for parents. So we have found a consistent drop in consent rates from families over the years. And, sometimes I say to parents, when I was trying to get consent for surfactant, if all the parents said no, your baby just got it and it saved your baby's life. Mm-hmm. And so, how do we do that? How do we engage families in research efforts. So that's a real challenge for us. And so you can see there's multiple issues here. It's very expensive to run these trials. And we're adults that they're looking at high blood pressure, they're studying tens of thousands of patients. For us, a trial that we can get 100 or 200 babies is a big trial. And it may take me 2 or 3 years. And then how long do I have to wait to see if the drug works or not? Do I have to wait till they're 6 months or a year when we can do a Bailey exam? Do we wait till they're older when they can start talking to make sure their speech and language and hearing are okay? Do we wait till they're 5 or 6 and follow them then until they're starting school? Or would you be happier if we follow the kids out to look at the effects of the drug until they're in high school, for instance, to see how they're doing? So these are the real challenges for us. It is a very complicated process, and it's some of the hardest things I do, yet it's also the most rewarding when you develop a therapy that makes a significant impact on outcomes.
Sure. And Jen, I believe you had mentioned to me in a previous conversation that was your daughter a part of a clinical trial? Or, I know you come from the background as a science teacher, so I'd love to hear your take on clinical trials and sick babies.
Hi, Keira. Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said I just wanted to get your take on this from a parent's perspective, and also from the fact that you have a background as a science teacher in terms of clinical trials and sick babies.
Yes, my daughter was part of a clinical trial very early on in the NICU, and like Dr. Davis said, it's very stressful. You have a series of doctors come in and ask your permission if they can put your child in a critical trial with several pieces of paper that you must sign. You're getting, a long explanation and a short explanation. And we did allow for the clinical trial for my daughter, mostly because, I was a science teacher and understood, the need for it. But it's not for every parent. But if there was, a very a gentle way, or maybe a better protocol, I think more parents would agree to allow their children to be part of a clinical trial, because it's so important. You can't learn anything new. Also, on a side note, my daughter was in a teaching hospital, so which is probably like many hospitals with NICUs, and the doctors are changing. And I think there's a certain mindset that can be established that it's all about education and helping your child, but also helping future children. And if it can be approached that way, I think it would be more easily agreed to.
Thank you, Jen. And Allie, I know I've talked with a few nurses about clinical trials and babies, and some have very, very strong opinions about the ethical implications of doing trials, clinical trials on babies. What do you hear from your colleagues, and what do you have to say about that?
As far as clinical trials are concerned, there are some going on right now that I know of, but it's medication that's already on the market. So it's already things being used in other areas of the hospital, more so adult patients, and then they're kind of using it in the neonatal population to see how it works there. The parents seem to be, I think the consent forms, like Dr. Davis had mentioned earlier, are very, there's so much information, and they're pages and pages long. So for us as nurses at the bedside, when we're participating in these clinical trials, the parents a lot of times will ask us what all the consents mean. And we're trying to decipher all that legal language as well. So it's very cumbersome and it's very hard to understand. And to sit and read through it, you need a dictionary to sometimes define the words in the consent forms. But my colleagues and I feel very strongly about clinical trials being done, because that's how innovation is going to happen. And it's a process. It's a very long process. But in our population, it's very minimal, if at all, with anything new being innovated for our population. And it definitely needs to be looked at. And I think as nurses, we feel sometimes quite helpless that we're using medications, and obviously we use them every day because this is what we have available to us, and we have wonderful pharmacies that help us to calculate things based on weight, and it's changed as the babies grow, and we have all of those resources. However, we're still looking for things to combat respiratory diseases and ROP and CP and all of the things that come along with a premature course that, we're not seeing a lot of that being done. And it would definitely be exciting for us as nurses to see more of that coming down to help our patients long term.
Great, thank you. We have another question, and perhaps Dr. Davis, you could speak to this. The question says, we already offer financial incentives through the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children Act and other programs. Why a transferable drug voucher? And then to follow up on that as well, because you talked about in your portion about the small, not just looking at the big pharmaceutical companies, but also the small biotech companies. So why do the larger pharmaceutical companies need an incentive?
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of the problem is the Best Pharmaceuticals for Children's Act gives you the opportunity to get 6 months extra of patent protection for your drug that you develop. But if you're only using the drug in a relatively small number of patients, let's say it's 50,000 children a year, babies a year in the United States, that is not a huge financial incentive to get people to go into that field. And you're right. I mean, when we gave our briefing, and I was honored to be with 2 of our participants tonight, we really had a great time, and we had a packed room with standing room only. It is complicated. People are worried about giving too much money to pharmaceutical companies. They think they are already wealthy and they already have too much money, and we shouldn't give them more incentives. And yet, the existing legislation in the Best Pharmaceutical for Children Act and others, where's the new drug development? There is nothing. And there is, I can tell you from being so closely connected to it, there is almost nothing in the pipeline that I can say, wow, this has the potential for being a major breakthrough in neonatology. And so we need to do something to really jumpstart this process. And we've done the carrot and the stick. PREA is we've requested that certain pharmaceutical companies develop a drug for children. And they've gone through the adult trials, and if the adult trials aren't promising, they're not willing to continue the pediatric trials just for that. So I think we need to do a better job to incentivize, unfortunately, the companies. And you're right, this is the potential for a lot of money for a company that develops something, but I'm comfortable saying if we set the bar high enough, I don't think there's anyone on this call that would say, boy, if you have a company that develops a drug to prevent cerebral palsy and dramatically improve reduce learning disabilities and improve cognitive outcomes, that isn't worth whatever dollars you can put on it. And so, unfortunately, there's no easy fixes. You saw that there's been 40 years of us trying different incentives and laws and everything else that just hasn't made a significant enough impact. So I think we're trying to be bold here. I think we're trying to be innovative. I don't see, everyone's so worried about it. Remember, it takes 10 to 15 to 20 years to develop a new drug. And I've been working on certain drugs since I was much younger. That's all I'll say about that. So I think we need to really be innovative in the way we approach things. And I think this is a bold approach. And the important thing for the government is we're not asking Congress or the NIH or anyone else to pay for it. We're saying, okay, if you develop this drug and we really keep the bar high, is that adequate? And so in a sense, you're right, we're asking the public to pay for it to a certain extent, but otherwise the public's going to pay for us to have to care for these kids if they don't do particularly well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was a very thorough response. And another question is, so I know this particular bill is specifically focused on drug therapies. Do you know of other possible bills, or is there anything else that you're aware of that may incentivize the development of other types of therapies outside of pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I think we'd really like to really push the device side of things. Mm-hmm. I think that's really one of the next steps for INC, for the International Neonatal Consortium. I think we recognize that that's probably going to be important moving forward. And I actually just got a survey from the FDA asking me for the types of devices that I think, and I'm sure they've asked a lot of us, what devices should be prioritized. So, for instance, we've been working on a computerized automatic oxygen adjustment module for a number of years, and we're waiting to start that trial. But can you imagine the potential impact of having a computer adjusting the oxygen and not basically have the nurses doing that? So I think we are looking for those kinds of things. We're trying to see if we can incentivize companies to make smaller devices. For instance, we get somebody to develop a catheter that we can put into the large blood vessels to close the ductus arteriosus, for those of you that had babies with what we call a PDA, a patent ductus. And so I think we would like that. We would like to really push that. And again, the FDA has a whole device consortium, and they are definitely moving that process forward.
Great. So another question, and this goes out to all of the panel. I think in our final moments here, we've got just a few minutes left. How can we best impact Congress in regards to this legislation? Dr. Davis, you have a lot of experience, it sounds like, with working with Congress.
Yeah, you know, this sort of thing has really blossomed over the last couple of years, and sometimes I say, wow, I don't know how I've gotten here, but I'm damn glad I am here. And I think there's a much more of an openness about some of these issues. And, you know, basically, I'm on the Leadership Council of the American Pediatrics Society, and we work closely with the government affairs folks at the American Academy of Pediatrics. And, you know, the bottom line is you do have these opportunities to make a difference. Sometimes it's reaching out to your congressman or woman or your senator and finding out who their health policy advisors are within their group or who their chief of staffs are. And I think there are those opportunities. I know there are opportunities to discuss pending legislation. I'd like to give you my thoughts about that we have to do more to make a difference. And when they hear your stories, they really are touched because you don't have an agenda. And so they're dealing with special interest groups all the time, with people that are coming to them, I need a favor and I'll contribute to your campaign and things of that nature. You're there to help, to be an advocate for your child. And that's very powerful for them. It really is. And so I think they want to hear from you. And this is a topic that isn't controversial. I mean, of course there are parts of it, as we've talked about, with the money aspects, but this is not, you know, involving ISIS or involving, you know, major issues. This is not something that they have to pay for because they are broke. And so I think they like this concept, and as I said before, part of the reason we've been so successful and why our briefing was so packed and why we ended up with our NAS legislation being unanimously approved, it was because this is a non-controversial issue. This is something that they can all seem to agree on, and it's a win for them because they want to be able to show people that they can get things done in Congress. And if they can do that, then I think they're all set. And so this gives them the opportunity to make a difference, to support a bill where they can say, you know what, I'm here to help babies. And I think if we can give them these opportunities to do something right, then I think not only are we helping our own children, but we're helping everybody's children.
Right. And Allie, let me ask you this, a question that has just been popped up, because I think this is where, you know, some hang up comes, is that, you know, just the kind of the general population view of the pharmaceutical industry, that they're so big. So how can we bring some reassurance that this is going to benefit babies more than the drug companies?
Well, I mean, if you're working in a NICU situation and you see what we see, and I know there's parents on the line, and you as a parent and Jen as a parent, you guys know firsthand what goes on from a parent perspective. But for us as clinicians, when I'm caring for a baby, for example, who has bronchopulmonary dysplasia, who was a micro preemie that is now I'm sending home on oxygen, I would love to be able to care for that baby or provide that baby with an innovative drug that can help to improve lung function and improve that baby's outcome in their future with, you know, asthma or getting, you know, being more susceptible to illnesses and lung injury and things like that. You know, the pharmaceutical industry has to do their job, and they have to be able to create and innovate and all of those things. And yes, obviously money is an issue, and, you know, things are quite expensive. But what are we supposed to do? I mean, as a clinician, I know that I have to be able to provide the best possible care that I can. And at some level, I'm grateful to the pharmaceutical industry for at least being there to try to put all this stuff together the best way that they can, and hopefully give us the tools we need to ultimately be at the, I call it, at the forefront, at the bedside, to watch and to see how these babies are going to flourish. I mean, if we didn't have the, you know, innovation of surfactants or nitric oxide, you know, a lot of these babies, you know, wouldn't be able to breathe. You know, all of these things, you know, yes, they're making money, but we're saving lives.
Right, absolutely.
You know, if one baby's life could be saved, then I'm okay, you know.
Great, thank you so much. Let's see, we're just about out of time.
Keira, this is Andy Rosenberg.
Yes.
Can you hear me? May I speak real quickly?
Yes.
There was a question that was asked about what people can do who want to support this bill, and with regard also to the timing of the consideration of this bill, because we happen to be at a very pivotal time right now for this bill. There may be a hearing in the coming weeks that the champions of the bill, Senators Casey and Cassidy, are hoping to demonstrate enough support for the bill in the coming weeks. And so on the website that has been dedicated to the campaign behind this bill, which is newbornhealth.org, there is a very easy way for individuals and for organizations to lend their support to the legislation. There's a very easy click-through button that allows organizations to easily identify who their senators are and to send a letter that will be hand-delivered to those offices in support. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to see the organizations, including Graham's Foundation and others, that have already gotten on board with the bill right now. So I would encourage individuals and organizations that are interested in supporting this effort to certainly go through the website or contact us otherwise about how to get their support on the record and have the letter of support delivered to their senators.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all we have for tonight. Thank you to Dr. Davis and Allie and Jen. Thank you, Andy. Like Andy said, just go to that website, www.newbornhealth.org, and they've got all the tools available for you to start making your voice heard. And as we had mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded, and we will be providing a link to the recording in case you weren't able to be here for the entire webcast. So thank you all so much, and have a good night.